Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode in our virtual event series on electrifying commercial fleets. I'm Andrew Elkin, Managing Editor of Electric Autonomy's EV Fleets Knowledge Hub, and I'm here to introduce this episode called When Your Fleet Charges at Home. Today's panel discussion is sponsored by Ford Pro.
What can I do to make my business more productive? Every successful business owner will not only ask themselves this question, but will create a business plan based on it. At Ford Pro, we're purposely built to help turn these plans into reality. So forget about cobbling together charging from here and telematics from there. We offer a more one-stop shop approach where you'll find ways to manage your fleet and bundle your billing. So if you're asking us, what will my business look like tomorrow? We think it's going to look pretty freaking amazing. Introducing a productivity accelerator for your business, Ford Pro.
We're grateful to the team at Ford Pro for their participation and support of this discussion. We've got a quick couple of things to touch on before we get started. I'll take this moment to acknowledge that our work at Electric Autonomy is conducted from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Before we get into today's topic, I want to quickly mention Electric Autonomy's work on the EV Fleets Knowledge Hub. If you're not familiar, this is an online course for fleet pros who want to take the first steps towards electrifying their fleets. So if you haven't already, I encourage you to check it out after our session today at evfleets.ca. The good news is that signing up is completely free. Une petite note pour les membres francophones de notre public. Nous sommes en mesure de proposer une traduction en direct de la session d'aujourd'hui. Pour activer cette fonction, cliquez sur le bouton « Afficher les sous-titres » ou « Sous-titres » dans votre barre de contrôle Zoom, puis cliquez la flèche pour sélectionner la langue de votre choix. And now, today's topic: how to set up and manage charging infrastructure when your fleet charges at home. Our two panelists today have so much experience helping fleets set up EV charging services across a range of settings, including at drivers' homes. They're here to share what they know about everything from selecting hardware to the kind of electric work involved, on down to how to reimburse drivers for the electricity costs of charging those vehicles. I'm delighted to introduce you to our panelists now. They are Kevy Stephen, Cross-Connected Marketing Manager at Ford Pro; Ken Sapp, Senior Vice President, Business Development at Qmerit; and my colleague, Ilana Weitzman, Vice President of Strategic Development, Clean Transportation at Electric Autonomy, who'll be moderating today's session. Welcome, you three.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Now, we'd love to hear your questions. Please use the Q&A box in the bottom right of your screen, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. You can also upvote questions that other people have asked. If you're not asking a question, add a comment in the chat box and engage with other attendees. And now, over to Ilana.
Hi, everyone. As some of you may know, in a previous webinar, we covered setting up charging stations at a company facility like a workplace or a warehouse. And today we've got these two fantastic experts to walk you through the scenario where your employees are taking their vehicles home, and whether that's a technician using a van or a sales rep with a company car. And in most cases, you'll need to equip these folks with a residential type charger, also called a level 2 station. So I think we're going to start with the biggest question, and I'm going to address that one to you, Kevy, which is who pays for and who owns the charger and who is responsible for the installation and electrical work because it's not happening on company property?
Well, thanks for asking, Ilana. So I guess there isn't one way to answer this, in the sense that every company will come up with, their own program and their own policy as they're trying to deploy their electrification, as they're on their electrification journey. So this is why before getting into too much details, we typically start with a consultation phase with the customer so that we can understand what are their goals, what are they trying to do, what are they trying to achieve, by when and how, so that we can best equip and support them in their electrification journey. Having said that, I can tell you that based on the business cases that we've seen, because as we're so early in the in the electrification phases, companies will typically pay for the deployment of the charging solution, meaning they will pay for the charger, and they will end up paying as well for the installation of the solution at the home. Having said that, though, we have seen also companies that come up with programs where they try and do a 50-50, where the company will pay 50% of the invoice, and the employer, the driver, will pay 50% of the invoice as well. So different programs exist. It's really based on the company policy that they will want to put in place. Ken, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to what I just shared.
Yeah, Kevy. Yeah, it's quite a paradigm shift, and that's why the audience is here today, because in the days of ICE vehicles, you have a fuel card, and it's really just tracking the fuel usage and things like that for that vehicle. Well, when you go to electric, by having a level 2 set up at the homes of these of the drivers, they leave every day with a full charge and all that. But we need to set up that fuel station at their home. And so because of that, we are seeing most fleets do pick up that cost or a portion of it. We tend to see an allowance by program of how much they're going to contribute to the home of the drivers.
That's great. And I guess one of the biggest questions also is, how do you evaluate this at scale? Like, I could imagine a fleet manager thinking, oh my gosh, I've got drivers, if it's a national fleet across the country in different geographies, how am I going to find qualified electricians? How am I going to evaluate these homes? How am I going to know which employees and residences are a good fit? How do you go about that, Ken?
Yeah, that's a really good one. You probably all have thought about this a little bit, or maybe a lot if you're already into it, but each home is different. And so one of the first questions we get asked all the time is, well, how much does it cost to do a charging station install at my driver's homes? And it's usually the answer is, it depends, because each home is set up differently. That is the electrical panel, how much capacity it has, where it's located in proximity to where this charging station is going to be. So those variations make it a little more complex than just simply allocating a certain amount. So what we built a program to set this up at scale. So first of all, to pick the right drivers, typically we see and we help with this, there's a pre-qualification questionnaire. And what it does is helps the fleet managers pick those most likely to succeed in a way. In other words, if there are some criteria that would help certain drivers, obviously probably work with Kevy and team on the route, length and distance of the route, their typical behaviors, things like that. But once it gets through that phase, it's more like, for example, does the driver live in a single family home? It's easier for us to do work at a single family home. There's a variety of questions that you ask to narrow down the field. And typically we see that with the first pilot or the first or second waves of drivers that are going electric. So yeah, you're right. It does need to be assessed, and we help bring those down to the ones that are most likely to succeed first to get a really good evaluation of what this could look like if they go all electric in the future.
Oh yes, go ahead, Kevy.
No, I guess, and I was just going to say, and this is really part of the early stages, as when we meet with customers, it's one thing to try and identify which driver, but it's also depending on the company business case, right? Does the company have a type of business that will allow the company to have first secure an electric vehicle and will have enough charging time in between, I guess, sessions or in between days of working, right? So we typically try and recommend that we'll always need between 8 to 10 hours to recharge, to fully recharge an electric vehicle, right? So if for some reason the company does not have that flexibility of having that 8 to 10 hours, this is where you start to rethink in terms of, well, okay, I do want to start that shift towards EV, but what type of EV? So meaning, is a plug-in hybrid a better solution, or a fully electric is still a better solution, really based on the business case of the company?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, the paradigm is that an electric vehicle sits overnight outside an employee's home in a home charging situation. and is recharging overnight. The benefit of that, as you said, Ken, is it's passive refueling. And then also the electricity rates tend to be lower overnight if there's a time of use rate in effect. So Kevy, yeah, absolutely. The first is, can that scenario, is it suitable for the business and the duty cycle? And if it is, then home charging can actually be a good solution because it naturally distributes the load. Whereas at a depot, you've got to bring power and capacity in for all the vehicles. At home charging, if you can make it work for your fleet, there are actually advantages because it naturally distributes things. Ken, I do think people want to understand the range of installation costs, and also the idea that you can almost set parameters around it. So when you're doing that filtering and that criteria of finding the most suitable sort of driver vehicle charger fit for home charging, that there's a process to filter that, and you have certain thresholds that can kind of identify those drivers where it's most cost and work efficient, I imagine.
Yeah, there's two parts of that. One is those drivers, again, that have the criteria that make them more likely, like we spoke about, and we could go deeper into that. Or the next one is, what does each driver home, what might it cost? So if you look at field service, you're now having to work, all the fleet managers have to deal with something they never had to really deal with before. Again, it was as long as the vehicle's insured and safe and how it's driven during the shifts and things, but now you have to worry a little bit about their home and how much it's going to cost to get that set up. So if a fleet manager, let's say you have a fleet that's geographically dispersed across maybe multiple regions, whatever. If one scenario might be, well, have each driver go and find a proposal for a licensed electrician somewhere in their neighborhood. It's a lot of work to do that. And what they'll find is incredible inconsistencies just by the nature of field service. Clarification, details, scope of work, things like that aren't always consistent, and there's always sometimes questions. So we've had to come up with a way to give that simple and streamlined process visibility to the fleet owner, fleet manager, but also going out to the homes of the drivers. So we built some structured pricing so that we can categorize most installations based on the most common setup. And it goes from simple to medium to hard. And hard means that the conduit run, what you're going to have to do is bring the level 2 charging station in and then power it. Well, it sounds so simple, but you rarely think about, well, you have to take a physical pipe and wire, set up, attach it to that panel, make sure it's got the capacity to handle it within the home, and do certain things to manage that, and set it appropriately, get permits for it when necessary, and then bring that all the way through. So that conduit run can get very complex. Basements in Canada is always one of our tricky ones because a basement can add complexity. You go, from, through the floor, out and around. There are just different things about it. So what we've done to solve many of these challenges and the variety of proposals one would get across the nation, we put together structured pricing. And so that allows, based on the home configuration, based on some certain criteria, it will put them into a category. We call them tiers behind the scenes. That allows us to say, kind of A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4 tier that gives the fleet owner manager a chance to budget based on some assumptions. And then we fit those drivers into those tiers as we go along. And there's always a little bit of room for outside the tier if things are more complex or the panel can handle it. There's always some exceptions to that. But for the most part, that system has built a chance for us to scale with the fleet companies so that you can have a better sense of budget way in advance.
That's great. And just to give people a sense of, least complex to most, what's our broad range?
Yeah, broad range, about 1,000 to 2,000, or maybe 1,200 to 2,200 Canadian dollars, just for if you don't need a panel. If the panel can't handle it, then we have measures to limit, manage. We can do things around that, but think roughly $1,000 to $2,000 for an installation. Yeah, and it can go up based on a couple other things. That's
great. So, Kevy, we've sort of handled the charger, the installation, how to determine that. Next question, and we've had actually quite a few audience questions come in through the registration form around this. How do you reimburse the drivers for their electricity? I imagine a driver or an employee might be quite nervous because they're like, hey, wait a second, this is being blended into my electricity bill, and I'm not so cool with that. How do we manage that?
This is good question. This is actually probably one of the first questions that we typically answer when we're meeting with customers that do want to, electrify their fleet and do the installations at home. As drivers, like you mentioned, are stressed about the fact that they would be paying for, the energy put in their vehicle. And the way that we've solved for this at Ford Pro is really through our software solution and our e-telematic. Because it is a misconception that drivers would end up, paying, all of these invoices for company vehicles. So through our e-telematic platform, the fleet manager, we're able to associate the account with the exact vehicle, right? So we've got the vehicle in the software. We can actually put the address of the driver as well. So therefore, when you go back into your dashboard, you're able to see every charging session that would have occurred for that specific electric vehicle, which is the commercial vehicle of the driver, right? So therefore, every month, we're able to pull a report that will tell us which VIN that is associated with the fleet account, at which address it was charging for how many times. So therefore, every month the driver is able to get a report that will tell him exactly how much energy was drawn for that specific vehicle. And then that software has, you do have the ability to set your rates. So therefore, because we've seen this, companies do decide to, let's say, add a certain percentage to make sure that the driver isn't penalized for using energy from the home. But every month we do have that report that allows you to really understand how much energy was used to charge the company vehicle. And therefore, and after that, then, the driver is able to get reimbursed for that specific, for those specific energy sessions that were used. Couple of other things also, because that software that we've developed, again, it is not charger specific, but it's specific to the vehicle. So a couple of things that you can do to help fleet managers to better manage the different charging sessions. So there's the reimbursement piece, but also, fleet managers are also able to set up alerts, meaning very different from a depot solution where, like you've got the vehicles are kind of like in-house or at the company location. So you have a better visibility of which vehicle is charging, for how long have they been charging. Now think of your fleet, all of the fleets are out there in different homes. So that software also, if you set up different alerts, different alarm, it will tell you, hey, wait a second, that vehicle was supposed to be charged, let's say at 9 o'clock, and it's 10 o'clock, it's still not charged. Then this fleet manager is able to get an alert that will allow him to make sure to understand what's going on and then address the situation. Or even if the vehicle is not well charged, is not properly plugged in, then those are different alerts that the fleet manager, even though the vehicles are not physically at the company location, he's able to have a good idea of, what is happening with the different, charging sessions.
Yeah, I've seen the Ford e-telematic system, and it's pretty remarkable, the controls levels that you have. We did have a question, and I want to maybe have you reiterate this, Kevy. As we kind of go through EV adoption, people may end up using that company charger for both the company vehicle and a personal car, that is parked nearby. I imagine the system can distinguish between those two vehicles.
Yes, exactly. So, first thing first, obviously it's part of the setup, right? But when you do set up the software, again, you identify the VINs of the vehicle that are associated with the fleet. And after that, again, based on the VIN of the vehicle, we're able to identify which session was used for the commercial vehicle. Now, obviously, if the charger is installed, drivers will want, if they have another electric vehicle, they will want to leverage the charger. But again, because we've got that VIN, it's very VIN specified, and we're able to identify quickly which charging session was for the VIN, or was for an unidentified vehicle, which your unidentified vehicle becomes other vehicles that, friends, families that have come to charge but are not part of the fleet. So that's really how you're able to separate and distinguish of, the different type of vehicles.
Yeah, that's great. So the company's not taking on that extra cost,
No.
but it's a benefit for the employee. So definitely win-win.
Mm-hmm.
Ken, I wonder if we can get a little bit deeper into, again, charging hardware and what's able to be installed at different homes and how you kind of figure out how to match the charging hardware and the vehicle and the residents.
We work with, say, the Ford Pro team. They typically recommend the charging station with the client. So almost all of our clients will select, they say, I like the station for the reasons you were just speaking about. Much of it has to do with the software for after the install for reimbursement and tracking. So we focus on installing safely and consistently the one that's selected for the company. So once they select, we make sure all the electricians across the entire network that are involved with the program have the proper installation guides, any technology training, things like that. So we make sure that is done. And then we work on getting the timing. Sequence is always important when they get the vehicle. I'm not sure you asked about this one, but the timing is that we typically get the installations done before they get their vehicle. In most cases, we can do that. With fleets, we typically have the luxury of knowing which drivers are coming through, which ones have been qualified, proposals have been approved in advance. We get that while the vehicle is either being outfitted or something on its way. I'm not sure if I answered your question exactly, but re-ask if I missed it.
No, that's great. And in fact, go ahead, Kevy.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe I can add, like Ken mentioned, it will typically start with us, our Ford Pro consultant, charging consultant, that depending on the type of vehicle that that the company will secure, we will recommend which charger will best fit the vehicle. At that point, we're not necessarily looking at the feasibilities at the different homes, right? We're just focusing on the vehicle and which charger will best meet. Now, having said that, when we are talking about home solutions, really, I see it as there's really like 4 different options that exist, right? So, I mean, yes, like you mentioned, we mainly focus on level 2 chargers because, level 2 chargers will allow you to recharge your vehicle between 8 to 10 hours, and then the next day you're good to go. I will say, though, that there is the level 1 charger that does exist that typically would not require a Qmerit or a Ken to install. And that, comes with the Ford vehicles. It's the mobile card that customers can now order as an option, right? So it's there, it exists, although we kind of discourage customers with that solution just because you get like really between 3 to 5 kilometers per hour. So it's just not enough. There's just not enough time to recharge the vehicle. But I do want to point out that it exists. It's there. If a fleet wanted to at least start the pilot with a regular outlet, that's something that can be done. As part of that, there's also the 240 volt that you can actually, so our mobile card, you can actually plug it into a 240 volt, which at that point will give you close to call it 20 kilometers per hour. So that mobile card, when it's plugged into a 240 volt, will give you close to 20 kilometers per hour. And I'm talking about an F-150 Lightning, right? So just to give you an idea. Having said that, though, I'll tell you that most of the chargers that we sell for home solution, it's the 48 amp charger. Just because once we've sold the charger, and then when we've got the electrician that comes into play, typically that 80 amp charger could become a blocker as it demands more capacity, right? So, but when we start, it's always the charger with the vehicle. And obviously, when we're talking about an extended range battery, if we can, we will try and recommend the customer to go ahead with our 80 amp charger, right? The 80 amp charger that goes with the bigger battery. But having said that, the capacity, though, at different homes will always bring us back to, most of the time, to our 48 amp charger.
Yeah, I've seen the Ford e-telematic system, and it's pretty remarkable, the controls levels that you have. We did have a question, and I want to maybe have you reiterate this, Kevy. as we kind of go through EV adoption, people may end up using that company charger for both the company vehicle and a personal car, that is parked nearby. I imagine the system can distinguish between those two vehicles.
Yes, exactly. So, first thing first, obviously it's part of the setup, right? But when you do set up the software, again, you identify the VINs of the vehicle that are associated with the fleet. And after that, again, based on the VIN of the vehicle, we're able to identify which session was used for the commercial vehicle. Now, obviously, if the charger is installed, drivers will want, if they have another electric vehicle, they will want to leverage the charger. But again, because we've got that VIN, it's very VIN specified, and we're able to identify quickly which charging session was for the VIN or was for an unidentified vehicle, which your unidentified vehicle becomes other vehicles that, friends, families that have come to charge but are not part of the fleet. So that's really how you're able to separate and distinguish the different type of vehicles.
Yeah, that's great. So the company's not taking on that extra cost,
No.
but it's a benefit for the employee. So definitely win-win. Ken, I wonder if we can get a little bit deeper into, again, charging hardware and what's able to be installed at different homes and how you kind of figure out how to match the charging hardware and the vehicle and the residents.
We work with, say, the Ford Pro team. They typically recommend the charging station with the client. So almost all of our clients will select, they say, I like the station for the reasons you were just speaking about. Much of it has to do with the software for after the install for reimbursement and tracking. So we focus on installing safely and consistently the one that's selected for the company. So once they select, we make sure all the electricians across the entire network that are involved with the program have the proper installation guides, any technology training, things like that. So we make sure that is done. And then we work on getting the timing. Sequence is always important when they get the vehicle. I'm not sure you asked about this one, but the timing is that we typically get the installations done before they get their vehicle. In most cases, we can do that. With fleets, we typically have the luxury of knowing which drivers are coming through, which ones have been qualified, proposals have been approved in advance. We get that while the vehicle is either being outfitted or something on its way. I'm not sure if I answered your question exactly, but re-ask if I missed it.
No, that's great. And in fact, go ahead, Kevy.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe I can add, like Ken mentioned, it will typically start with us, our Ford Pro consultant, charging consultant, that depending on the type of vehicle that that the company will secure, we will recommend which charger will best fit the vehicle. At that point, we're not necessarily looking at the feasibilities at the different homes, right? We're just focusing on the vehicle and which charger will best meet. Now, having said that, when we are talking about home solutions, really, I see it as there's really like 4 different options that exist, right? Yes, like you mentioned, we mainly focus on level 2 chargers because, level 2 chargers will allow you to recharge your vehicle between 8 to 10 hours, and then the next day you're good to go. I will say, though, that there is the level 1 charger that does exist that typically would not require a Qmerit or a Ken to install. And that, comes with the Ford vehicles. It's the mobile card that customers can now order as an option, right? So it's there, it exists, although we kind of discourage customers with that solution just because you get like really between 3 to 5 kilometers per hour. So it's just not enough. There's just not enough time to recharge the vehicle. But I do want to point out that it exists. It's there. If a fleet wanted to at least start the pilot with a regular outlet, that's something that can be done. As part of that, there's also the 240 volt that you can actually, so our mobile card, you can actually plug it into a 240 volt, which at that point will give you close to, call it 20 kilometers per hour. So that mobile card, when it's plugged into a 240 volt, will give you, close to 20 kilometers per hour. And I'm talking about an F-150 Lightning, right? So just to give you an idea. Having said that, though, I'll tell you that most of the chargers that we sell for home solution, it's the 48 amp charger. just because of, once we've sold the charger, and then when Qmerit, when we've got the electrician that comes into play, typically that 80 amp charger could become a blocker as it demands more capacity, right? So, but when we start, it's always the charger with the vehicle. And obviously, when we're talking about an extended range battery, if we can, we will try and recommend the customer to go ahead with our 80 amp charger, right? The 80 amp charger that goes with the bigger battery. But having said that, the capacity though at different homes will always bring us back to, most of the time, to our 40 amp charger.
Yeah, I think that's a good reality check. I think those 19.2 kilowatt chargers are very tempting, but in a home installation Ken, I imagine that's a rarity that you find a home panel that has that level of capacity.
We make it really easy. We just say, if you don't have a refrigerator and you don't have any lights and you turn off all your electric appliances, you can charge your car all day long. It's perfect. No problem. Just kidding. What we do often, actually, the Ford Pro units are adjustable. So based on the capacity of the panel, there's a couple of different options. One is oftentimes we try to fit with which we fit as high as the home can handle without upgrading. So if we have to take it down to 40 or something like that, yet it's still sufficient. Of course, we work with the team to make sure it'll charge quickly enough overnight, like you said, so they're ready to go first thing when their day starts. So, but we can tune that down a bit to fit within the capacity of the panel, or we can upgrade. I saw one question come through. We do panel upgrades pretty regularly when needed. That gets into higher cost because the panel most of the homes in the inventory of homes across all North America and even in Europe, especially Europe, that are older, just weren't built for this kind of additional capacity. We didn't see it coming 25, 30 years ago when a lot of homes were built. So you'll quickly max out the panel, what it's built to do. You have your lighting, your conditioning, in some cases, all the stuff you need for electrical. The panel just may not handle it. So we have a couple of different ways to handle that. One is through load management. We can switch to the charging, especially maybe at night, typically at night. Of course, we have drivers that have different schedules, but for the most part, if we use day shift as the standard or the norm, they can charge at night when it's less expensive. When other appliances are probably off, you can get a lot more capacity happening. So it works out well. But we can tune the station down if needed to fit nicely into what's available without doing some sort of upgrade. So there's a lot of options. Again, it's variable at every single home, but we do manage that pretty well with our structured pricing.
I also see some questions around homes that are leased. I don't know if you've encountered that, or if you have a process that you follow when the home is a leased property.
It's a great question. Yeah, we do. We typically, again, back to the the pre-qualifying questionnaire, when you're seeking those drivers that are most suitable for the first couple of waves. Single family home is typically better. Multifamily is more difficult. We do those as well, but it's a different sort of process to get them served. Anyways, the charging station, we just get those set up in the single family. And yeah, I'm not sure if I already answered the question or not, but I think I did.
A leased situation.
Oh, leased situation. Yeah, thanks. That pre-qualification question, yeah, if they don't own the home, so once you go into the own, if there's a permit, it will be set up for the register. It'll be registered to the homeowner. So if somebody's leasing, which is quite common actually, we need the permission of the homeowner where it will be applied to. So in that early questionnaire, we typically ask, do you own the home? Of course, give us permission if that's the case, because they are the homeowner. And if not, can you get the permission of the homeowner? Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's great. So it really, as you're saying, because what we've heard is that these home chargers sort of pay themselves back in fuel costs fairly rapidly, even though you're kind of, in a way, giving the benefit to a landlord. It's not super stressful, especially if the installation cost is not significant. You will see those fuel savings kind of come back to the organization. I imagine that's sort of the attitude that you're seeing.
It's an upgrade to the home, and we see it as a driver benefit. We see a lot of companies really encouraging their drivers to go electric. and to have the company pitch in or contribute, in most cases subsidize entirely an entire upgrade to the home, is quite a benefit, because that will last forever. That brings up another set of questions that'll probably follow, but yeah, it's an upgrade to their home, and it's we haven't seen any landlords that we know of, I can think of, that have ever said no. You know, if the company's going to upgrade this home and do it safely and properly and have it inspected, so yeah, it's a win for everybody.
And if I may, and it's part of the reason why we did decide to partner with Qmerit on our home installations in North America, and more specifically in Canada, because we know the job is well done, it's professional, but it's consistent across provinces, right? So you get that same type of installation and peace of mind, whether you're in BC out west or you're in Quebec or Quebec. So it's having that consistency that really gives us that peace of mind that we're able to say that, yeah, it was well done, well installed. Because we're seeing more and more drivers, people getting creative or trying to be creative at installing chargers, right? So creativity is good, but you want to make sure that it's well done.
Yeah, I agree. There is a question here, Ken, about multi-unit residential buildings and how you've handled that in the past. I don't know if you have a case study of some scenarios where you've been able to enable home charging in a multi-unit setting.
That's usually done with the property owner. And so there's, as I said early on, it's a little more complex for if you just want to get your drivers, prepared for electric driving. So with the single family, it's the homeowner and or the landlord. We spoke to that. So that's pretty easy to get permission. When you go to a multifamily dwelling, something like apartment complex or a condominium complex, you have a couple things that have to be there. You have to have a dedicated meter and dedicated parking, because you're going to do a physical run to that place. So in some cases, it might be categorized as a multifamily, complex. But if you have those in place, that homeowner or the one that's got that spot can pay for it. Once it goes into something more common, or they have more spaces that they need to have visitors, it becomes just more challenging. So we have another process for that, and certainly we do those. It's more of a commercial engagement where you work with the property owner to see how they want to use the stations. Again, it might be publicly accessible. That might be different rates for the driver that's going to be using it the most or has primary. There's a lot of variables that go into that. So it's a topic of itself.
That's great.
And you could blend, but you also could blend public charging with that. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm going to sort of segue into some of our audience questions, because there's some great questions here. Kevy, is there a charger that has two connectors? If one of the employees is looking to charge both a personal vehicle and a work vehicle overnight, and be able to do that simultaneously. Very specific use case, I imagine now, but in 4 or 5 years, I imagine that's going to become more common, because the homeowner will want to take advantage of the same overnight electrical rates.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen a level 2 charger that has 2 connectors. We've seen obviously DC chargers, DC fast chargers, right? But that's not what we're talking about here. This would be a level 3 chargers. In terms of level 2 chargers, what we've seen is, and even that can be challenged, but what we've seen is really installing 2 chargers, and depending on how you place them, we do have a post that sometimes we do sell to customers where you can install 2 chargers on one post, but this would be it's more a depot application, I would say. What I've seen really is just installing 2 chargers at the home location.
Okay, and here's a question: how do you determine the reimbursement rate? I imagine in the telematics software. Given that there are varying energy tariffs, is that automatically calculated in, or how does the fleet manager get that specific on the reimbursement?
Well, yeah, it has. This is the work. No, it's not automatic because it'll vary. The utility rates will vary by provinces, right? So typically, what we've seen is, drivers really looking at their utility bill, and that's how they're able to identify. That's how they've been able to identify what's the utility rate that they've got to apply for that specific location. But there's not one utility rate, as it varies by province. So I'd say that at that point, the easiest really would be to contact the utility company so that they can help. If you're not able to quickly identify on the invoice, like, what's the proper rate, I would say that contacting the utility company is the safe way to go.
That's great. And a little follow-up on that, which is people are wondering if there is a fee for the software package that we've been discussing.
Great question. So right now, we offer 1 year complimentary whenever you purchase an electric vehicle with Ford. So 1 year complimentary, no charge at all. And then after that, obviously pricing will vary, but it's around the $20 mark per month per vehicle. Sorry, when I say VIN, it's really per vehicle because every vehicle has a VIN. I assume that people know, but just to clarify, like every vehicle that exists has a VIN associated with it.
Who takes on the servicing of the charger if there's an issue? How does that kind of after sales process work?
Yeah, we usually do that. We guide every driver through the process. We work with them with the local installation quote, the proposal, the timing, the sequence, and everything else. And if there's anything later downstream that needs to be addressed, we take care of that.
Okay. And I've got a question coming through about whether you typically install non-network charging for these applications, or are they smart? Does there need to be connectivity to enable the interaction with the telematic system?
I'll hit it first and then best Kevy. Most we see are intelligent stations. The benefits we see are connectivity to, charge at night, intelligence, gathering of information. There's actually discussions about that. Do you need to have a smart station for it? But I think the software, so far, all of our fleets are using smart stations. Kevy, what do you see?
Obviously our chargers are all smart. So they're all smart. They all have SIM card capability. They've got SIM card capability or Wi-Fi capability. Having said that, it's important to understand that our e-telematic solution isn't charger specific. It's VIN specific, right? It will capture the information from the vehicle and not from the charger. So therefore, you could have a charger that is not smart, that doesn't have a way of connecting to a network, but still be able to capture data because the data would be drawn from the vehicle and not from the charger. So we do have a software that exists for our chargers, but in terms of talking about our e-telematic solution, this is really vehicle specific and not charger specific.
This is a question I probably should have asked earlier, but how long does it take to do the installation at a typical home?
The installation is typically, less than a day. Once we get the job done, it's really the coordination of timing, scheduling, proposal, receiving, proposal review, proposal approval, and then scheduling it in time and in sync with the vehicle coming. But it usually takes a few weeks by the time we get in and get all that moving. But it's well aligned with the timing of the vehicles. Once in a while, we get urgent ones that the vehicles are already here. We need something quickly, so we expedite when needed.
I'd say, like probably the installation piece, that last piece to the puzzle, is probably the one that's the easiest, right? What takes really long is to establish the program, understand, really establishing the program. Understanding which driver will be selected. So it's just that setup phase that's very long, right? Once you've kind of like nailed down like the details of your program, you've selected the drivers, then having us ship the chargers, within 3 to 4 days, we can ship a charger and then have it delivered at the home. But it's really that whole process, that whole, I guess, setup process that's long. The installation, in my mind, this is within a day or two, we're done. Driver is able to charge its vehicle and fully utilize its solution. But it's everything that's around it. And that's why we're saying, the minute that you're thinking about securing an electric vehicle, you need to be thinking about your charging solution and what will that look like, right? Obviously, today we're talking about specifically home solution, but sometimes we'll see the fleets have a mix of home and depot solution. So therefore, drivers are able to charge at home, but also are able to charge at the company location. So it's all of that you need to think about as you're planning to deploy. That will take time, so that it's well planned to avoid mistakes down the line, and then therefore creating more cost to the company.
And also the review of every proposal. So especially if they're geographically dispersed, we pull that together and we review those, so the fleet manager has complete authority to approve or not approve. But sometimes that takes time. Sometimes there's questions. We need to go back to the installer in the territory. Our team works with that. So sometimes there is a set of processes and things that happen along the way. So we usually give it like a month. Give it a month's time that the driver is engaged in getting things set up and getting it reviewed, getting it approved. We have automated approval process of some customers that, based on certain criteria, we move very quickly at scale. So, I think we covered that. The actual event itself is pretty short.
Yeah, so not too disruptive to the employee at the end of the very long food chain. They're really only seeing an electrician in their home for less than a day.
One of the comments we hear from pretty much every fleet customer is, keep our drivers in the field. Don't distract them. They're busy. We need them at servicing their customers or selling to their customers or managing their customers. Don't let them get overly distracted by this process. So we work really, really hard to keep them productive and not be a distraction. We carry a lot of that weight in just making sure communication is great. Everybody's involved. Everybody's seeing what's going on, and keep it moving.
That's great. I have a question here, and I'm going to try and interpret it. So I apologize to our audience member if I get this wrong, but I think the question is, is a home charger adequate for a long range vehicle that's coming home, let's call it near empty? And I want to clarify that probably when you're talking about home charging, you're talking about a light duty or, maybe into a van or a pickup truck, but obviously not a really large vehicle. Kevy, any concerns about sort of, let's call it, filling up that battery overnight, or does the math work?
Yeah, no, the math does work, right? And it's part of the reason why Ford Pro Charging came to life, right? The primary reason was to offer a solution that would meet our vehicles, our trucks, our commercial vehicles that our fleet are using, right? So this is where, if the vehicle is capable of receiving that much power, our 80 amp 19.2 kilowatt charger is the one definitely that we would recommend for, let's say, these extended range Lightning F-150. And most of the time we see also that rarely will vehicles come back at home with less than 20%, right? So it's always going back to that range anxiety where we always think that we're making more mileage than we think we are. But most of the cases that we're seeing, vehicles do come back at home with less than 20%, and within that 8 to 10 hour time frame, we've got the charging solution that will allow our vehicles to recharge and be fully charged for the next day. Having said that, understanding how an electric vehicle works is critical, because we've talked about this in the past, and preconditioning is something that, whether you're at home, whether you're at the depot, it's something that drivers need to be aware of. We need to educate the fleets on making sure that the drivers understand that vehicles have to be preconditioned, especially like in areas like Quebec, where it gets colder during the winter time, to make sure that the vehicle is nicely warmed when it's time to start your day, so that to avoid that loss of power, that loss of energy, for your day. But most of the time, our charging solution are really suited to meet our truck vehicle, meaning our vans, our e-transit van, or our F-150 Lightning.
Yeah, and I think preconditioning, that's a really good point, is the advantage is while that vehicle is plugged into the charger before the employee starts their day, that vehicle is either cooling or heating up. And your employee will be very happy that they don't have to chip ice off the windshield anymore.
Exactly. And I guess I don't want to assume that everybody was at our depot webinar that we did, right? But again, preconditioning, just to make sure that everybody understand the concept behind preconditioning, is really letting the vehicle know at what time at what time is your departure time, to allow the vehicle to draw energy not from the vehicle itself, but really from the grid. So therefore, you're not using the energy of the vehicle, but you're really using the energy from the grid to allow to heat up the vehicle or to cool it down when it's time for you to departure for your day.
Yeah, and that can be set in advance and coordinated with each driver,
Exactly.
which is fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah, and this can be done. And typically, this can be done through the e-telematic platform. But also, if you do not have the e-telematic platform, we do have our ForPass solution. As home solutions tend to be somewhat similar also to retail solution as well. So we do have the ForPass app that will allow you to really do all of your setups, preconditioning. So again, I said the vehicle. The minute you think about the vehicle, you have to think about your charging solution. But think of it also as, the minute you're thinking about EV software, the minute you talk about EV charging, there's a software component that comes with it. It's really hard to manage your charging sessions, your EVs, without that software component. Whether it's e-telematic, whether it's ForPass, whether it's another solution, but it will come with a software management some way, somehow, so that you understand what's going on, and really to make sure that the vehicle stays on the road. And the worst thing you want is it's time to start your day and you cannot pick up the vehicle because it's not, it didn't charge overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question here about charging at public chargers as well as home chargers. So, topping up on the go. How does Ford handle those two types of charging sessions, one at home and then one publicly?
So again, and it's part of that kind of like that one-stop shop, what we thought about. We've got home, we've got depot, but yet, yes, we do have public charging as well available. And again, it starts with setting up your fleet, setting up the VINs within the software to let kind of like your dashboard, your software know, all right, which are the vehicles that are part of my fleet. And at that point, when you're registered, when you've got that e-telematic platform, you're able to go to public charging. And at this point, if you need to top up the charger, if it's part of the Blue Oval network, the charger will recognize the vehicle because it's part of the fleet. And at that point, you're able to initiate a charging session without a credit card. And then the invoice is actually sent back to the fleet manager. So that's really that other piece to the puzzle to really remove that range anxiety and the fear of being stuck on the road with no energy.
Are there cases, this is a very specific question, but can the charging station be purchased by the employee at the price offered to the company? So I imagine this is a scenario where maybe the company is paying for the electrical work, but they want to offer the employee the opportunity to buy the charger because that's a long-term piece of their home that they may need for personal use as well. Or if the employee leaves, how can that work? Or what have you seen? Maybe Ken, I don't know if you've seen the kind of departure phase yet in your work.
We have, yeah. And it's one of those things to ask in advance. I mean, obviously an employee doesn't let you know in advance, but one thing we ask, are they going to move? And that's one of the questions, what happens if they move? Many will know if they're going to move in the next few months, not always, but you ask. And if they're preparing to move, you might want to wait till after they move to settle it. So you do the installation once. That's one. As far as the station's acquisition, oftentimes the fleet management or the fleet company, the company with the fleet will typically negotiate what they want, which one of those, and then because they can probably get a better deal by doing it that way, and they contributed to it. Or I'm trying to think if we've had any that I know of that the customer, the driver would just buy it on their own. I'm sure that's something they could accommodate, because that just becomes an asset that they keep forever, and maybe the company would. I don't see any issues with that. For us, we handle it whichever way that the company desires to acquire the station, as long as we have it, know it's coming, we have the proper information about it to do the installation safely and correctly, we could accommodate that.
And we get a lot of questions about bi-directional charging. I know we're all very excited about the possibility of this technology. Kevy, where are we at today in Canada in terms of enabling bi-directional across this country?
Yeah, I'd say that yes. And again, when we launched our Lightning, this was one of the feature that we talked about, the bi-directional. Unfortunately, up until now, and the information I received from my colleagues internally is that the CSA, they actually just published the bi-directional standards. Up until now, we were waiting for the standards to be published. They were just published last week. So right now, really, I'd say that we are in the testing phase right now of being able to implement this solution in Canada. Right now, if you go on a website, you'll see that we're saying 2024 is when we'll be able to fully deploy that technology. But up until now, we haven't been able to do installation or to leverage that solution, just because we still had to go through and work with the CSA so that we have proper regulations to allow us to use that solution in Canada. Having said that, yes, it is a cool feature, and it works because we've seen it work in the US. But it's important also, though, that drivers understand that even if your vehicle is capable, even once we're fully ready to deploy, there is an additional cost, right, associated with the bi-directional, because for a driver to be able to leverage the bi-directional, you'll need to purchase a home integration kit, right? So think about buying the cost of charger, the cost of installation for the charger, and then you have to add a home integration kit. And that kit itself, right now, as we speak, we're looking at close to $6,000 just for that home integration kit, right? So it's an additional cost. And at that point, when we're talking about programs, we're talking about, well, who's paying? Would fleet want to pay for that additional $6,000? This is where you fall into the different programs and the different policies around each company and however they want to manage this.
Right. So that might be something that more an individual would invest in, like a contractor who's got a Lightning and also wants to use it, the bi-directional capability. Yeah. That's great to hear. It's on the horizon, and will be sort of coming to market soon. So with that, we're going to end the Q&A segment of today's session. Kevy, Ken, a huge thanks to you for sharing all your insights and knowledge with our audience today. And I'm going to now hand it back to our host, Andrew.
Thanks, Ilana. It's been such an interesting conversation, and you and Kevy and Ken covered so many of the possibilities and questions about home charging services for fleets. Thank you as well, our audience, for the many great questions that helped to take the conversation so much farther. Another big thanks again to Ford Pro for sponsoring this event and for being a great partner in the evfleets.ca Knowledge Hub. And finally for today, don't miss Electric Autonomy's next webinar. It's a deep dive into the electrification of medium and heavy-duty fleets. This webinar will look at fleet electrification from every angle, ranging from how companies choose the right infrastructure to electric vehicle procurement, the opportunities associated with EV infrastructure, and why companies that aren't moving forward with fleet electrification are now at a disadvantage. The big move takes place on October 12th. Don't miss it. You'll find the link in the live chat of this Zoom session and at our website, electricautonomy.ca. Thanks again to everyone for being with us, and have a wonderful day.